Right, should we make a start, everybody? Thank you for joining us today. So this is the meeting of the Joint Devolution Committee, and it's Friday, the 15th of December. So thank you for everybody who's joining us today, both in person and remotely as well. And just to start off the meeting, we have apologies today from Zoe Metcalf, the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner. Do we have any other apologies? No, thank you. A second item on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 23rd of October 2023. Does anybody have any thing to say on that item at all? No.
Happy to move them as a true record, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So can I see if somebody's willing to second them being approved as a true record? Thank you. And can we just have a quick show of hands, then we're all fine with those. Thank you. Yeah. And Councillor Dad is okay with the minutes as well. He's busy over there. Right, thank you very much, everybody. Item number 3 is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? Councillor Kilbane?
It's not a prejudicial interest, Chair, but just for absolute transparency, in 2015, I supported Your Space when they were trying to secure a site in my local neighbourhood. So I was chair of the local community association. So I supported them through that, but I'm not a member. I have never been a member, but it is a matter of public record that I supported them back then. So it's not a prejudicial interest, but I think for openness and transparency, just to make sure people are aware of that. Thank
you, Councillor Kilbane. Yes, Helen.
Helen,
Mike, please.
Sorry, I chair Broadacres Housing Association, so I'll be stepping out for the paper about the Brownfield housing.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? No, thank you, everybody. And next item 4, is questions and statements by the public, and we have 2 people who've indicated that they'd like to speak. So Gwen Swinburne, would you like to come forward? You have 3 minutes, and would you like me to give you an indication? Can you tell me?
I'm in time, thank you, Chair.
Oh, okay, you're okay. All right, thank you very much. Off you go.
Thank you, Chair. We were sold the Mayor Combined Authority on the basis it brings decision-making closer to the people. Yet in every regard, so far, the opposite is true. Forget the people, even our councillors under both administrations have been almost entirely left out. This is a plea to do better. Despite repeated requests, no underpinning documents, including but not limited to the Constitution, were presented to York Scrutiny or Audit Committees. A short governance paper to our Corporate Scrutiny Committee this week made it clear there was to be no member involvement in considering even the draft Constitution. Our members railed against this and were given a 250-page draft constitution 1 working day before their meeting. Suffice it to say, the members of all parties were incensed that they had been excluded from being consulted on this key document. They agreed to not comment substantively until a further revised draft was presented to special meetings to both corporate scrutiny and audit and governance in early January. It's all on the webcast. I raise this here because it needs to be on public record that it is councillors whom we elect to represent us, not officers. They should not be excluded as they have been. We need to meld the best governance practice of each, York, North Yorkshire and the Manchester model, and make sure that the worst practice is not adopted. For example, whilst in many, I might say most regards, but not all, the governance arrangements at face at North Yorkshire Council are far more robust than ours. Their public participation and webcasting protocols are really, however, quite chilling compared with York's. Thanks for the dispensation to speak freely today. I understand your emphasis for the moment is likely to be on finance and political representation, which appears to be quite different from the deal our members at least thought they signed up for, and also who will chair the authority January to May. But we must not forget the essential foundations of governance. Finally, I have to thank Suzanne Harrington for her refreshing frankness on this matter, and recognise all parties, including me, have been guilty of not pushing staff hard enough to provide a proper governance timeline and transparency so we could all properly engage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your comments there, Gwen, and I would just like to say that I attended the scrutiny committee on Monday night when the draft constitution was discussed, and so members did have view of it before today, and there's also been a commitment to bring it back to both to York scrutiny committees. So would anybody else like to make further comment at this point? Yes, Councillor Les.
Well, just to confirm that we had a similar arrangement at the council, the North Yorkshire Council. I attended that scrutiny meeting, and I think if any of my members had an issue with it, they would raise it directly with me, and they haven't.
Thank you, Councillor Les. Thank you for that. Thank you. So next person we have on the list is Councillor Widdowson. Would you like to come forward and ask your questions, please?
Chair, I didn't realise I had to ask the questions at the start. I was going to ask them when we got to the point of the meeting, which is what I saw happen up in North Yorkshire last time.
Can I ask you which items of the agenda you want to ask
item 6
questions
and
on
item
then,
10.
please? Item 6 and 10, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
that's absolutely fine. Right, okay, thanks everybody. So our next item is item 5, and that's finance update, and Debbie Mitchell's going to introduce that report for us. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you. So the report in front of you outlines a number of financial issues for consideration. Firstly, you're asked to allocate a sum of up to £1 million from the Mayoral Investment Fund to work up a pipeline of investable schemes. The economic framework paper elsewhere on this agenda outlines the work that's been completed to develop a shared set of priorities. And so to accompany this and to enable very quick progress, we propose to use some of the combined authority funding to allocate to the constituent council, so City of York Council and North Yorkshire Council, to develop a pipeline of investable schemes worked up to full business case. Secondly, as part of the devolution deal, the government allocated 347,000 to the combined authority to develop a pipeline of housing projects and work closely with strategic housing partners. Government are ready to release the funds, but as the combined authority has not yet been created, asking for your agreement for North Yorkshire to be the accountable body for receipt of those funds in the interim. Next is an overview of the latest position on implementation costs. Back in July of this year, the committee approved 1.6 million for implementation costs, but that was based on the combined authority being created in November. As we know, due to the various government delays, the combined authority won't be created until January, early next year, and therefore we do have an additional 3 months of implementation costs. In addition to that, there has been some significant progress made on things like Brownfield and net zero, which has meant that we've incurred more programme costs than we'd originally forecast. And just as a reminder, the committee will be aware that these costs will be recovered in full once the funding is released on the creation of the combined authority. And finally, we've included a brief update on the autumn statement. So whilst it was virtually silent on local government funding, there was some more positive news on extending deeper devolution powers. Clearly, our immediate priority is to create the combined authority successfully, legally, from day one, but we've just included the information published by government as an annex for members' information. So recommendations are set out in paragraph 6, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Debbie. Does anybody have any questions for Debbie or any comments to make on this paper at all? No. Sorry, Carl. Sorry, Councillor Les.
Well, just to say, I think it's a very pragmatic paper. It's a pragmatic approach to how we must move forward to the first meeting of the combined authority in January.
Thank you. Councillor Coulbain.
Yeah, and again, speaking in support, really, I think it's really important for residents that we hit the ground running, that they see some real benefit from the extra resources that the combined authority is bringing, and it makes sense to have that pipeline worked up and good to go as soon as we possibly can. So yeah, thanks for the paper.
Thank you. Yes, and also just to add to that, it's also really important that we make rapid progress on the housing aspect. So bringing that money forward as well is really welcomed. So I just, unless anybody else wants to say anything at this point, no, thank you. So I just draw everybody's attention to the recommendations that are on page 9 and page 10. And they ask us to note the contents of the report, confirm approval for the use of £1 million from the 9 million mayoral investment funding that will arrive on the creation of the combined authority. And that is to work up the pipeline of schemes in both authorities. And that's delegated approval will be given to the interim director of transition and interim section 73 officer to approve allocations to specific projects and to monitor outcomes. Then to confirm that North Yorkshire Council are the accountable body for receipt of 347,000 of capacity funding as outlined in paragraphs 3.4 to 3.6, and note the implementation and programme costs and confirm approval to increase the budget by 250,000. Please, can I see those who are in favour of the recommendations? Thank you, everybody. So that's unanimously approved. Thank you. Our next item is item 6. And Councillor Widdowson, do you want to ask your question now or after the... Yes, yeah, absolutely. So who's going to introduce this report? So James, would you go ahead, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start by making a verbal amendment. So the title of the paper is the Shortlisting of the Brownfield Housing Fund Programme Full Business Case, which is slightly contradictory. The word shortlisting needs to be removed. It's the Brownfield Housing Fund Programme Full Business Case is the title of the paper. The committee will recall that we were awarded £12.7 million for brownfield housing as part of the devolution deal. This represented 2 years worth of funding, so our pro rata per year is around 6.35 million. This has to be delivered by March 2025, and we're recommending at this meeting that we approve 9.68 million at this point and consider a further call for the outstanding 3 million. So just summarising the process today, we brought a prospectus to the November 22 Joint Committee, which approved the criteria which we would do a call. The call went out in January 23, with the expression of interest being shortlisted in March 2023. We then went through to 11 projects going to full business case, 2 have subsequently withdrawn, and the 9 that have come through have been undergone Gateway and then Green Book compliant independent appraisal. Within the prospectus or within the rules of the brownfield housing, the average intervention per house should be £14,000 or less. However, case can be made for more where there is reason to do so. Within this paper, it details that 6 of the 9 projects we're approving were £14,000 or less intervention, 3 were more. But I think importantly, overall, it's 13.1 thousand. So within the programme guidelines of 14,000 a house, we come in under that at £13,100 per house. That'll deliver 700 new homes, of which 252 will be affordable. Once we've approved this, and we're then also asking for approval of just under 4%, so 504,000 for the independent appraisal, legal and project management costs. That leaves around £3 million outstanding, which we were within this paper proposing to go out for a new call for projects. Within this, it talks about the same delivery timescale of March 2025. However, subsequent to that, we have had conversations with the department in Whitehall, and because the combined authority has not been approved as early as we thought it was, we've got dispensation actually to carry a third of that funding, so circa 4 million. So all of this 3 million through into the following year, which is 2025-26. I think we perhaps need to just put on hold the call for projects and bring back a revised timeline which reflects that flexibility that we've been given. So the recommendation is that we approve the 9.6 million projects which are detailed in the report. We approve the £504,000 for the project management, appraisal and legal costs. And we also approve delegations to the Director of Transition to provide the final sign-off on the proposed investments once the conditions which have come through the appraisal have been met. and we approved delegation to the interim director of resources for the combined authority to accept the 12.7 million from Department for Levelling Up Homes and Communities. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Councillor Widdowson, would you like to ask your questions now?
It's just one question on this section, James, and it's a question from both residents and some of the councillors from within this area. There's £140,000 for the Lowfield site within the Brownfield funding. Is that enough to deliver the 3 undeveloped plots? Because the project's been kind of, we welcome the money, but the project's been stalled for a couple of years. And the residents that we've got in that area are, to be polite, fed up looking at a building site that's opposite them. So it's just, how is it progressing? How do we know that it's going to be successful? And is that actually enough money to complete it? And if you can't answer now, more than happy for you to get back to me in writing.
Thank you, Councillor Widdowson. What I'd say is all the business cases have been independently appraised against what's called the Green Book appraisal, and that looks at deliverability as one of the core criteria. So the 5 business cases, of which deliverability and financial are 2 of those 5. So both the finances and the deliverability have been looked at as part of the independent appraisal, and the recommendation that came back through that it was deliverable by March 2025, and therefore we are as confident as we can be. Notwithstanding that, we understand that in delivering any housing scheme, there are always risks and there are always unforeseen costs that may occur, but we are confident it can be delivered with what we've put forward at the moment.
Is it possible to look at the operational measures on that so that we've got some confidence? I don't know if we're allowed to look at the business case.
Perhaps I can just step in here, and please, perhaps if somebody can advise me, I believe that this is likely a question for CYC rather than the combined authority. Could somebody confirm that for me, please? Please go ahead.
Yeah, if this is funding that's being ultimately devolved to CYC to deal with the project, then it's then forced to CYC to run the project governance on that and ensure that the scheme is delivered in accordance with the bid that's been submitted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for James at all about or comments on this report? Councillor Les?
Thank you. It's certainly not a question. I mean, I welcome the paper, as indeed I welcome the sites that started to come forward when we did the call for sites, because I think it shows that the government have faith in devolution, that they are putting their money where they want it to be spent, ahead of the fact that we haven't got a combined authority yet. We will get that in January. So we're actually doing this work ahead. And I think it shows that the government have got faith in us to actually get on and do the job. I fully accept the point about having a pause because of the changes from DLUC. That just makes sense. But very happy to accept this paper, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Les. And I would just like to say on housing that this is a subject that is very close to my heart. And goodness me, do we need additional housing of all tenures in York, and as quickly as possible. So it's really good to see that these projects supported to both give for rent, build to rent homes, but also affordable homes. And I hope to see from what James outlined that the next tranche of money will be purely affordable housing that we will see come through in future months. So I think that this is a very welcome input into brownfield sites that otherwise would be undeliverable. And I can't wait to see them get going. Anybody else want to speak at all? No? Okay, thank you, everybody. So in that case then, can I draw your attention to the recommendations which are on page 48? And they outline that the Joint Committee is recommended to approve the following, to approve 9.68 million in principle, noting that 504,000 is towards programme management costs subject to the following conditions: establishment of the mayoral combined authority, which we expect to be imminent, further due diligence and contractual agreements with project applicants. We are deferring the decision to reopen the call for projects, which is second bullet point, and we are going to approve delegated responsibility to the Director of Transition to provide final sign off on the proposed investment once the above conditions have been met. And then to delegate responsibility to the interim director of resource for the mayoral combined authority to accept the Brownfield Housing Fund allocation from DLUC. Right, okay, I think that's it. Can I see those who are in agreement with those proposals, please? Yep, those are unanimously passed. Fantastic, we will get some house building going. Absolutely great news. Right, item number 7 then is the economic framework, and James Farrer is going to introduce that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of the economic framework is to ensure that when the mayor is elected, they join a region with a shared strategic ambition and a shared set of priorities. So it's really reflecting that the combined authority is about the combined capability of City of York, North Yorkshire councils and the combined authority together. So we've created an economic framework. The process of getting to the economic framework is to start with the City of York Council Economic Framework and North Yorkshire Council Economic Framework, both of which were widely consulted on with stakeholders across their respective regions. And then we brought together commonalities to create a framework which reflects the priorities of the region. The framework is underpinned by 3 overriding ambitions. One is to be England's first carbon negative region. It's around good growth and also increasing opportunities for all. And it also reflects that health and well-being should flow throughout the whole of the framework and should underpin everything that we look at. Once you then get into the heart of the framework, it's got great places at the centre of it. This reflects the importance of places within the York and North Yorkshire economy. It's then got 7 kind of complementary themes. It's a well-connected economy. It's a sustainable and affordable housing, a thriving workforce, a green and circular economy, a global economy, productive and innovative businesses, and it's the potential of our culture and heritage. So together that creates the framework. The proposal is that following approval of this draft at this meeting, we will go then and consult further, including where required with the overview and scrutiny committees in City of York and or North Yorkshire, and also the LEP board at the end of January. That will enable us to then bring back a final framework for approval by the combined authority at the subsequent meeting, and that will then be ready for the mayor to review when they get in. So it's notwithstanding that this is a framework to prepare for the mayor, it'll be absolutely right and appropriate that the mayor, who will come in on a mandate and a manifesto, will then have the opportunity to review this and understand how we take it forward beyond then. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Does anybody have any questions, comments for James at all? Yes, Councillor Les.
Thank you, Chair. Just very happy to take this back to my council to put it on my executive agenda, but also perhaps, Barry, we could suggest to scrutiny that they might like to put it on their work programme as well.
Thank you. Councillor Kilbane.
Yeah, I think that would be a useful thing to do. I think, Councillor Les, because it's already on the scrutiny agenda for York. So I think for both councillors to have good scrutiny of it would be great. And just thanks to James for pulling this paper together. There's a lot in there that comes, well, it all comes from both councils really, and it's great to see that being reflected in the wider MCA. And of course, the economic frameworks that come from the councils have already been consulted on widely with local businesses and stakeholders to get them to that point. So rather than duplicating, taking what we've already got, and the sum being greater than the parts. Yes, I think what we've got here. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And just to reiterate that we are carrying out this work now to make sure that we're in the best possible position for the mayoral combined authority when it's created imminently, certainly in January, so that we can function until the mayor is elected. And we should note that the mayor will come into place and these documents will be live and ongoing review over a period of time. So thank you, everybody. Right, can I just draw your attention to the recommendations on page 94? So the Joint Committee's recommended to approve the draft economic framework to enable further consultation with City of York and North Yorkshire councils and wider stakeholders. Can I see those in favour? That's everybody, unanimous agreement. Thank you. Right, we move then on to item 8, which is the combined authority governance development of the constitution for the combined authority. And Barry Khan is going to introduce this for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I can introduce it, I'm sure others and Suzanne will be here as well. We'll go into more of the details. But this report here is to present the working draft to members with regards to the Constitution. I would take the time to say that officers from North Yorkshire Council, from the City of York Council and from the PFCC office have been working very hard together and collaboratively to come up with a draft of the Constitution. And before I just go into that, it's important just to recognise the timetable with regards to the combined authority. Currently, it's been debated in the House of Commons and the House of Lords. So we're expecting the order to be approved at the end of the year, which will then mean that we can have our first meeting of the combined authority. I think it's believed to be on the 22nd of January. At that initial meeting, it will need to do a number of things, including approving the Constitution. What's then going to happen, obviously, on the 2nd of May will be the elections for the mayor. And then on the 7th of May, all the PFCC functions will transfer. So there's two key stages with regards to approving the Constitution. First, it needs a Constitution ready for day one, the 22nd of January, so that it can function to do the powers that have been devolved to it. Then in May, they'll need some additional parts of the Constitution to be incorporated to be able to deal with the PFCC functions. So what you have before you today is the first draft of the initial functions of the combined authority in January. What the combined authority will need to do then is to incorporate other parts before May to make sure that the PFCC functions are transferred across and ensure that the appropriate governance and checks and balances are included in that as well. So further reports will come to the combined authority with regards to how that's incorporated. So just wanted to briefly mention that. Just talk about what the proposal committee structure is of the combined authority. So within the combined authority, it's proposed that there'll be an overview and scrutiny committee. The order doesn't say how many scrutiny committees the combined authority shall have. Within the report, that talks about some recommendations from national government to say actually it's recommended to have one overview and scrutiny committee that is multidisciplined, that can look across the whole range of areas of a combined authority rather than having it split into specific themes. So that's what the proposal is there at the moment. And it's proposed there'll be 6 members from each constituent council. There's also the Audit and Governance Committee, where it's proposed that there'll be 4 members from each constituent council and also an independent person. Another committee that sits under the combined authority would be the Business Committee. And I think item 9, I believe, you have your insurance framework in there. And that goes into more detail about how the LEP will be incorporated into the Business Committee. Currently, because the Constitution is a working draft, it talks about set numbers. I believe it's 4 members, elected members and 8 private sector members. Within the assurance document on item 9, they talk about a different number with potentially 5 members, elected members and 10 private sector. So clearly we're working with regards to ensuring that we get a proper assurance framework, and the Constitution proposed will reflect that assurance framework. There's a question that's put in the paper about whether you need a separate committee for transport, not necessarily needed on day one, but the new combined authority will create a number of different functions with regards to its areas. And one of the big areas is transport. So there's a question mark within the report about whether that needs to be created and something to be considered for the future. The other part of the committee structure that isn't in there is when you have the police and fire functions. And again, we're working with the PFCC's offices with regards to seeing how we can mirror the existing arrangements that work at the moment, where there's potentially a joint independent audit committee for policing. In the new arrangement, it might become a panel, and you have an independent audit committee at the moment for fire and rescue. So again, that needs to be incorporated before May. So that's not before the papers that are there today, but we're working very closely with the relevant teams to ensure that that's there. So hopefully I haven't just taken everything that Suzanne wanted to take, but I'll pass over to Suzanne if that's okay, Chair.
Suzanne, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I think Barry's covered most of it. I think I would emphasise that it is going to continue to be a work in progress for some considerable time, because it's a new organisation. It is different, although it is a local authority, it is different from your unitary councils in terms of how it's structured and its functions. And we're learning, because every combined authority is different. So if you take, for example, Manchester, there are 10 constituent councils West Yorkshire has 5. So it's very different to what the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority will look like. And I think we're feeling our way through it. It's very important on day one we have something that's legally sound, that sets up a framework within which we can start to work. But I think it's very much accepted by everybody in the discussions I've been in with officers, members, colleagues, that we are going to have to sort of work our way through this and look at whether we're meeting everything we think we should through those arrangements. And of course, it's within the gift of the Combined Authority to change its constitution, provided it remains within the law. So that's really what's underpinning what we're doing. I think the only other thing I would mention is a little bit around timescales, because we had quite a discussion at the Scrutiny Committee at York about getting an up-to-date draft out. James and I were in a meeting earlier this week with colleagues from North Yorkshire on transport, and there's quite a bit of work to do around making sure the functions in the constitution properly reflect what the deal was agreed. And there is quite a bit of work to do to get it absolutely right. I'm very keen that the next iteration is as far as it can possibly be to being the one that we would want to present to the inaugural meeting. So I did optimistically say I might be able to get it out by next Friday. I think that might have been a bit overly optimistic given the conversations we've had this week. I have a meeting next week with both Barry and Bryn to look at some other principles around what's included, what we might need to take forward and what we might need to bring along later. So I think I would, and just to be very, very clear and open, my proposal would be, and it's a matter for yourselves at the end of the day, is to bring to get what I hope to be pretty final iteration out by the 5th of January. And I would suggest, it's again a matter for yourselves, but I would suggest we publish that on that date so that everybody can see it and people have as long as they possibly can to have a look at it. And then if they want to raise concerns, they've got opportunity to do that through their leaders or through their committee structures if there are meetings. I just think it's really important that we give people a bit more time to look at it, but I do want it to be as final as it can be so that people are not looking at documents that are going to be changed substantially between then and the first meeting. So that's where we've got to in terms of some of the practical stuff. Happy to answer questions on anything within the document that members would wish to raise.
Thank you. Councillor Widdowson, I had you down for item 10. Is that? Oh, okay, right. Well, please come to the table and go ahead.
Okay, it's really good to see that there's a constitution coming, and it's really good to hear that it's a live document. We did have a very long conversation in York at our scrutiny committee because we got hold of the document 3 days beforehand and it's nearly 400 pages. So only some of us had read some of it, some people had read all of it. We do have some major concerns, which I know we've discussed with you, Susan, and I know we've discussed in the scrutiny. The major ones being the scheme that York signed up to said that it was proportional on each of the constituent authorities. The order is silent on whether it's with the constituent authorities. The Constitution is stating that it's both authorities added together. That is not what York voted on and agreed to. On top of that, we also voted and agreed to a mayor that wasn't first past the post. So that's been changed as well. So there are some serious concerns inside of York that we voted for one thing and we're getting something else. And that is the question that I would like some clarity on.
Sam, would you like to come back on that?
I can come back on the first bit. I'll look at colleagues on the second bit. With regard to the political proportionality in relation to scrutiny, I did go away and look at this because it was clearly a major concern at the scrutiny committee. You're absolutely right. The order does mention political proportionality, I think, in relation to one of the fire panels, but not in relation to the scrutiny committee. However, there is a statutory instrument, 2017, which sets out the legal requirements in relation to scrutiny committees at combined authorities. Excuse me. And paragraph 4, you bear with me. makes it very clear that when it comes to combined authorities, the scrutiny committee's political proportionality is in relation to the area as a whole, not the, individual council areas.
Can I ask why that wasn't made clear when we had the scheme? Because we did not agree to that. We agreed to proportionality for each of the authorities.
Barry, would you like to answer that, please?
I don't know if I can give a full answer, but with regards to, so the scheme was our proposal to government with regards to things that we wanted incorporated in the order. What's come back from the order is, on the whole, has been agreed. So lots of things have been put into the order and included in some of the residual legislation. However, they haven't put in the order that particular bit. So to be clear, it still has to be politically proportionate. It still has to be politically proportionate. But however, the default position stands, it has to be political proportionate across the geography as a whole, because the combined authorities representing the geography as a whole. So we asked for it to be put in the order, it didn't, but it's still politically proportionate, but the calculation takes into account the whole geography as opposed to splitting it up into two councils.
Thank you, Barry. Right, I think we'll move on now, shall we? Does anybody else got a question at all? Okay, I'd just like to say that I was at scrutiny committee on Monday evening, and the issues that were raised there were about the political balance of scrutiny committees and making sure that we're clear how that's going to work. And those conversations will need to happen quite promptly, won't they? Because that will need to be decided upon for the January meeting. And then also just to say to everybody that the York Scrutiny Committee did ask for it to come back in January. And I'm just aware, given what Barry had said, I don't think I'd fully appreciated that the inaugural meeting will likely be on the 22nd, which is the same day as the proposed Scrutiny Committee, which I'm not sure is ideal, really. Bryn, would you like to?
Yeah, so in light of that inaugural date for the combined authority to meet, I have asked officers to look to see if there's an earlier available date for the two committees from York to meet to consider that draft document. And obviously, if Suzanne is talking about having it published on the 5th of January, then the week before the combined authority meets, that document should be available for consideration.
Okay, thank you. So we can look at bringing that forward so that it is a more meaningful feedback to the lead members of the authority. Thank you very much. Barry.
Appreciate it. I don't know if it gives any comfort or not, but for those members in North Yorkshire Council, we created a constitution on the 1st of April this year. And in that, we recognise that we create a new constitution, we try and get it as right as much as possible, but things will develop, we'll make changes. So we do have the ability to review that and we go back. Same like the combined authority, we'll be able to make those changes again. And when we created North Yorkshire Council, we gave a commitment that within the first 12 months, we'd do a fundamental review of the constitution and come back and take a full further report to full council. So it may well be that the combined authority does the same as well.
Yes, I think that would be a good idea to feed into our decision-making commitment on some level to be discussed, I'm sure, as to that time period. Suzanne, do you want to?
Yeah, we can put a recommendation in the report to the inaugural meeting about a review, if that would be helpful to give the assurance to both councils that the matter is going to be reviewed.
Yes. Does that sound reasonable to everybody? Yes, yes, that would be great. Thank you very much. Right, anybody else? No, okay, very well. So the recommendations are on, which one am I looking at? Page 102. And my computer's now seized up, so please hold with me. The recommendations are that the Joint Committee considers the contents of the report and notes the proposals in relation to the drafting of the constitution for the combined authority. So it's very clear that this is for information and an early indication, and more will come back in January. So can I see those who are in agreement, please? We're all in agreement. Thank you. So we note the report as recommended. Thank you, everybody. Right, now item number 9 is the Combined Authority Local Assurance Framework. And I believe that the person who is introducing that is James, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I'll introduce it, then I'll pass across to Paul Clark to give a little bit more detail. So the local assurance framework's a requirement under the devolution accountability framework, and they set out how the combined authorities will use public money responsibly and make robust and lawful decisions and make sure that we achieve value for money. So that's the reason we've got an assurance framework. I'll ask Paul now just to talk through the process today and where we're at with this assurance framework. Thank you, Paul.
Yes, thanks, James. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, following on from James's point and the item beforehand, this is one of a series of documents that the combined authority is required to have. Not necessarily in law, but by the various government departments who are devolving powers and funding to assure them that we have the robust governance in place and the correct scrutiny, audit and transparency arrangements to handle that funding. Producing the document is it's a slightly prescriptive process because it sits beneath the English devolution framework, which sets out what must be included. But it is an iterative process similar to the Constitution insofar that we need to have a document on day one that's sufficient to pull down the first tranche of funding from government and to enable us to function when staff transfer in properly. In terms of how it's structured, it's really around the Green Book principles on appraisal to demonstrate value for money. And it sets out some of the internal decision-making processes that would take place in order to get an application or a scheme from its initial point to a point of decision and delivery. Where we're at now, we've drafted this document in consultation with officers from both councils and in consultation with the Office of the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner and amongst local enterprise partnership staff too. We're at a slightly awkward decision point. I wouldn't say awkward necessarily, but we would have liked to have brought this to members earlier. But unfortunately, we didn't get a draft order in sufficient time to be able to bulk out the governance arrangements, and we had to provide a draft version of it to the Department for Housing, Levelling Up and Communities by the 30th of November. So the version that we have now is a snapshot of where we are based on the proposed governance arrangements. A version is with the government now to begin their internal review process of it. And they will come back to us and work with officers from the combined authority and from the local enterprise partnership to come up with a version which they are satisfied is enough to release the first draft of funding to the authority. So on that basis, I'm presenting this version of the assurance framework, asking for authorisation of this committee or endorsement of this committee, but also with seeking delegated authority to the Director of Transition to make any supplementary changes that may be necessary to get it up to the standard needed by the various government departments to release the funding.
Right, thank you, Paul. That's really helpful. Does anybody have any questions, comments on this item? No. Okay. Just to really reiterate that this is a prescribed process, isn't it? And there is, as I understand it, not much latitude for our own input into this. It has to adhere to the legislation that's laid out in this respect. Is that correct, Paul?
That's correct. And there is some license to mould it towards the governance arrangements of the organisation. And I think almost with some certainty, we would follow a similar path to the Constitution in that we would have a regular relationship with the Audit Committee and the Scrutiny Committee of the Combined Authority to make sure it remains fit for purpose and it reflects the operating models that are taking place. So it's by no means a final version. I'm sure the final version, well, the next version that goes to members at the inaugural meeting will look slightly different to this, but over the next 12, 18 months, there'll be additional versions that will be brought back to members for approval.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Right. So the recommendations are on page 341, and they say that the Joint Committee is recommended to approve the draft Combined Authority Local Assurance Framework and delegate authority to the Interim Director of Transition in consultation with the committee co-chairs, which is the two leaders of the constituent authorities, to make any material changes which may be necessary for the agreement of a final draft with the government. So please can I see those in favour of that? Thank you. So that's approved as well. And thank you to James and Paul for that too. The next item is a verbal item, item 10, devolution update, and James is going to provide that to us. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And kind of most of the update has been referenced in other papers, but it's just worth bringing it together. So probably the two critical things are, with regard to the order, it's been debated by Parliament this week. So it went to the House of Commons and then also to the House of Lords. It passed through both houses with relative ease. That will now go. What will now happen is that both the House of Lords and House of Commons will confirm in writing to the Minister that debate has happened, and that will enable the Minister then sign the order. And legally speaking, the combined authority is created the day after the order is signed. So that will hopefully be just the week before Christmas, but it may be the week after Christmas, depending on parliamentary process. So that's really positive that it's been through the debate, and that's moving along positively. Members will also note, as Debbie referenced in her budget paper, that at the autumn statement, government announced a level 4 devolution framework. This is very much setting out the future path of the potential for devolution, and it's entirely optional for any area whether they progress down part or all of that framework from that perspective. Obviously, the first piece of work we need to do around that is to understand what the opportunities are, what that means, and actually then make a decision about whether or not we'd like to progress. And clearly the mayor will need to be involved in that discussion. So we can do the preparatory work before the mayor is elected, but we'll obviously have to wait until the mayor's elected to decide on how we progress around that. So that level 4 framework, coupled with the order progressing, really gives a shape of where we're at. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Would anybody like to speak at all? No. Councillor Kilbane?
So potentially, we could have a combined authority formed in time for Christmas, is what you're saying?
Legally speaking, yes. Obviously, it won't be possible to adopt the constitution and appoint the statutory officers until January. So legally created before Christmas, yes. But with regard to actually being able to, if you like, do anything practically and operate, that will have to be into January.
But nonetheless, a few £100 million would be quite a nice Christmas present, I would guess.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as Paul referenced, the assurance framework will need approving by government first. So that's not going to happen before Christmas. So it would be a fantastic Christmas present, which I'd welcome, but alas not.
Yeah, and I'd just like to reiterate, I think what Councillor Kilbane was alluding to, that anything that we can do to make sure that the funding can start to be put to the use that we've allocated it to and get those projects started would be really welcomed. And we look forward to the day of seeing the money actually arrive with us, and we start to be able to look forward as well and do some of the other tasks that our communities are looking forward to. So I would just like to say a couple of things for learnings, for officers, and as we move forward into the function of the combined authority. So this is feedback from scrutiny committee that they've asked me to bring to you all. So I already mentioned about the political balance of scrutiny committees in the earlier item. We also, the committee thought that it would be a good idea to try and coordinate when information is shared with members across the two constituent authorities, so that information goes out as early as possible and at roughly the same time, or if at the same time would be really good. And also that there's adequate time for consideration of that information that is going to and through scrutiny committees as well. Because some of these documents are really very meaty, aren't they, and take some concentration. So I think those were the main things that they asked me to bring to you, just for consideration. Right, anybody else want to say anything at all? No, okay, so our recommendations for this report are on page am I doing the wrong one? Sorry, verbal update, no recommendation. Marvellous. That makes life easy. Okay, so thank you for that, James, and thank you for all the work that the officers are continuing to do, because I know that you are all working on a skeleton framework whilst doing other jobs for the constituent authorities, and it's a very challenging timeline and task as well. Councillor Les?
Well, can I just echo your remarks, Claire? I mean, some of us have been on this journey for a long, long time. And there were times when we probably thought that we weren't going to succeed and that we weren't going to win through, but we have. And, you know, it's pretty good to actually be sitting here today, having watched the debate in the House of Commons, and I missed the one in the House of Lords this time round, but I watched the one in the House of Commons. It was in a committee room and the minister stood up and said, "This is good for York and North Yorkshire. I commend it to the committee," and everybody said yes. And if we could have had that sort of speed of decision making all the way through, it would have been absolutely wonderful. But, you know, I'm very conscious of the fact that a lot of people around this table and people elsewhere have done an incredible amount of work to actually get us to this point. And there will be an opportunity, no doubt, when we have the first meeting to actually repeat it. But there'll also be the danger at that first meeting. We'll be so busy with everything else, we'll forget to say thank you to the people who've actually got us to this point. Our role was actually quite easy. We just had to sort of ring up ministers and say, come on, let's get this done. But officers had to go down there to Westminster and Whitehall and spend oodles of time actually getting things put into place. So I'd just like to just say thank you to them.
Yes, no, absolutely. Yes, Councillor Jabor, I did a marvellous job there, didn't I?
Thank you very
Please
much
go ahead.
indeed, Chair. I found this extremely interesting. The verbal update was great. I was in North Yorkshire Overview and Scrutiny Committee that looked into the mayoral combined authorities and the future. It's all extremely exciting. Now that we're talking about the points you mentioned in terms of scrutiny for the combined authority, just out of curiosity, I was wondering whether there would be a separate website for the mayoral combined authorities where all the papers will appear there. So it will be independent from both the democratic one for York and for North Yorkshire.
Yes, it's a separate legal entity, and whilst the two members of the combined authority initially are the two constituent authorities, it is a separate local authority, and as such will have its own website and will have to publish papers and follow all the usual rules about meetings in public when it sits as a combined authority.
Which means that all the papers would be sent at the same time to both councillors from both organisations.
Yes, and just I think what you were alluding to, where I mentioned that there would need to be coordination of release of information. It was really when we're having consideration of documents through the scrutiny functions in the constituent authorities to make sure that there's coordination of when that information is released to members at that stage as well. Okay, thank you. Right, what were we doing there? We're on, right, I think we are finished there, aren't we? So item 11 is the work programme at the end of the reports pack. Who's going to, Barry, please, can you just run us through that? Thank you.
Finger of fate was suddenly pointed at me by surprise, so thank you. So yeah, you'll see on page 391 is the work programme for the Joint Devolution Committee, and those keen-eyed will actually recognise that actually if we create the combined authority in January, the work programme transfers to the combined authority itself. This committee has been set up in effect as a shadow combined authority with, I suspect, similar members that's going to be on the combined authority. So that work will continue. And then the next meeting of the combined authority will be on the 22nd of January, where you've got a number of documents that need to be approved, including the constitution and appointments to committees as well. So it's just there to note, and this will then transform into the combined authority. I'm just checking around the room about whether there's attending to be another meeting of the joint committee or not. So this will be the last meeting of us as a joint committee, of yourselves as a joint committee, and it'll then transform into the combined authority at the next meeting.
Thank you, Barry. Councillor Dadd.
Just out of interest, my eyebrow has been raised. Approval of strategic local transport plan in March or April. Surely the input of an incoming mayor would be critical and key to that. I just would hate to think that we're duplicating work, etc., etc. So why have we got that down there? There must be a reason.
Apologies, it should be draft. It should be. So under the terms of the devolution deal, we have to have it in draft status by March, April next year, ready for when the mayor comes in to be able to review it. So obviously looking at the timescale from Department for Transport, it will be draft, not the final document.
That gives us some assurance, but I would hate that we're ploughing hours and hours and hours of work into this for a mayor potentially to come in and just written the damn thing up. So I think we've got to be mindful of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's my understanding, I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, actually the transport funding is already set. So with regards to what we're doing at the moment, it's not tying the hands of any future mayor going forward, and the mayor will be able to come in and then make decisions on the future budgets.
Thank you, everybody. Anybody else got anything to say on the work plan? No? Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So as Barry outlined there, let me just make sure I've covered all items. Where are we? Oh, is there a recommendation? Sorry. Recommendations for item 11 for the work programme, to note the members are asked to note the committee's work programme from Appendix A. So can I see those in favour of that? Thank you. So that's passed as well. And then just to finish the meeting off, any other items the chair agrees should be considered as a matter of urgency? I've had nothing communicated to me. So I would just like to say, as Barry pointed out earlier, this is the last meeting of the Joint Devolution Committee before we create the combined authority in January. And I'd like to thank everybody sat around the table and in the room who've been involved in that for all of the work. And of course, we know that the work doesn't stop here. It continues, but this is the end of stage one, I would say. And now we go into the meat of the project. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice weekend and Christmas. Thank you.